First of all, this is John Selleck. I'm a spokesperson for the My Success Coalition. It's a mouthful, but it's about a really important issue. My Success stands for safe utilization of carbon capture for environmental and economic success. And some of you were along for the ride with us in lame duck, where we took a shot at passing these bills before the end of 2024. And we made great progress in the Senate, but we know the House ran into some difficulties and we had to pause there. So we've been working to regather our efforts, and we're really excited to feel that the Senate bills will be imminently reintroduced anytime now, hopefully this week, and we could be seeing some action from a Senate committee perhaps as soon as this week. If not, then at least within the next few weeks. So we think that there's going to be a lot of activity on that front. A second thing that we're really hopeful about that's different than last time is that we didn't have a House package last time. And Michael Lima will talk about this a little bit later. We think there'll be a big difference on that front this year. So we're really excited to go through this. A lot of people that were with us in December, it was the first time they were hearing a lot about this information. And I think one thing that was super helpful to find for most members of the media that we brought together was that Michigan isn't just a prime place for carbon capture and storage. Michigan is a world leading academic powerhouse when it comes to the study of both carbon capture storage and carbon capture and utilization for other products. That involves Autumn Hagsma from Western Michigan University and Susan Fancy from the University of Michigan. We'll hear from both of them first this morning on the academic side. Next, after that, we'll have Rich Bowman from the Nature Conservancy. And then we'll have Robert George from the Michigan Laborers. And then, as I mentioned earlier, Michael Lamo from the Michigan Chamber will be able to talk through a lot of the details and the process of getting these bills through. We will do Q&A at the end. I know some people want to do questions during, but I'm a little bit leery of interrupting the flow of the presentations by the academics, so I apologize for that. You can be mad at me later, but take notes, and we definitely are doing Q&A at the end. And any questions we can't answer today, we'll follow up and get back to you ASAP. So with that, we're going to get started. I'm going to introduce Autumn Hagsma from Western Michigan University. Go ahead, Autumn.
Good morning, and um, it's saying the share isn't turned on. Um, there it goes. Bear with me with my voice. I seem to have caught some crud last week while I was traveling, so my voice is a little bit in and out, but I will do my best. Can you see my slides okay? All right. As introduced, I'm Autumn Hagsma. I'm the director of the Michigan Geological Repository for Research and Education and assistant director of the Michigan Geological Survey, which are part of Western Michigan University. I have been leading carbon sequestration related research for well over a decade now, touching on a variety of different details associated with it. As a as a high level summary of what CCUS is, it is as it sounds, it's the process of carbon capture, utilization, and storage, which means capturing greenhouse gas emissions from man-made sources to safely and permanently store it and or utilize it. And Susan will go through all the really cool things that you can do on the utilization side of things. It's so much more than enhanced oil recovery, but that is a part of the piece of the puzzle as well. There's three main components to think about with this, and that's the capture. And there's a lot of different types of capture technologies depending on the type of sources and usually the purity of your source. Transportation is how you're going to get it from your source of CO2 to where the right geology is to safely store it. And there's different types of transportation too, depending on the site and the region. It could be pipeline, ships, trucks, etc. And then storage. This is looking at deep geologic formations, and these could be saline reservoirs, so non-drinkable water source and geologic formations, depleted oil and gas fields, and another type of storage in our basalts or mafic types of rocks that we have in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. And why do we need CCUS? When you think about this from a bigger picture, is that when we think about what we need as a society, whether our population is increasing or not, our energy demand is certainly always increasing, our need for materials, rather that be electronics, our clothes, our cements and steels and all types of materials along with how much waste that we're producing. And all of this can lead to an increase in greenhouse gas emissions, which can lead to a greater climate impact. One of the quotes I really like is from a 2020 IEA about how we need a transformation and not just how we consume energy, but how we produce it, but also with our different processes. So we need to think about that as a whole picture on how are we creating the materials, how are we creating our energy, and how can we make it more efficient. CCUS is really a key technology to help us meet not just our state goals, but our global reduction goals as well. It supports a variety of industries, especially sectors with difficult to abate emissions. Now, Michigan's total CO2 emissions, probably about 30% of those fall into that difficult to abate zone. And it helps us diversify our energy options with a focus on transition and transformation. There's a lot of common questions and misconceptions associated with CCUS. So I want to touch base on a couple of these. A big question I get is CCUS safe? And I'll say, yes, absolutely. We have a pretty strict permitting process that carefully regulates CCUSs, and we have to have a very thorough evaluation of the geology. We have to have a lot of different monitoring technologies and mitigation strategies in place. The whole purpose of the EPA's classic permitting is to protect our groundwater. So that moves into this other question we get a lot is, could it go into our groundwater? If we follow the permitting requirements and if we do a thorough investigation of our sites, we should have thousands of feet of impermeable geologic layers that separate storage from our groundwater and from the surface. Another question we get is CCUS like fracking? The answer is no. Part of the process with CCUS is to make sure that we don't cause any damage to our rocks, both reservoirs and our cap rocks. And we design it in such a way to be protective of our geologic formations. CCUS, as I mentioned, supports a variety of industry sectors, not just the fossil fuel industry, especially leaning towards those with difficult to abate emissions. Do we still need CCUS if we have renewable energy? Absolutely. It takes a portfolio of solutions. CCUS is just one of the solutions that need to work together. This includes working together with renewable energy, electrification, and more efficient processes. And CCUS isn't new. CCUS has been around since probably the 1970s, if not earlier, maybe as early as the 1920s. And Class 6 permitting has been implemented about 14 years ago. And we've had a lot of multiple successful demonstration projects around the US and globally, including in northern Michigan, where we've stored about 3 million tons of CO2 so far. So Michigan is really positioned, I think, to be a leader in CCUS. We have a diversity of sources where we emit more than 75 million tons of CO2 a year, but we also have a diversity of storage solutions where we have saline reservoirs, we have depleted oil and gas fields, we have interesting basalts in the UP that might be feasible for CO2 storage. When we look at this at a big picture, we have billions of tons of storage possible just in these key formations that we've evaluated historically. We also have a history of managing the subsurface very well in Michigan. We're the #1 in the US for natural gas storage. We have a history of producing and managing oil and gas. We've been identified as a top region for hydrogen storage and potential for hydrogen production, not to mention other things like critical minerals, our brines, and other types of resources. So we have a significant history to lean on. We've also been part of research programs since the early 2000s that are looking at the feasibility and safety of CCUS across Michigan and across the entire Midwest. We've had large-scale tests, small-scale tests. In our current project right now, we're looking at de-risking in a way of closing critical gaps in knowledge and information. So we put everything together. We have a really interesting picture of, we have sources, we have storage, we have hundreds to thousands of years of storage capacity when we look at it. So in summary, I want to say that Michigan really meets all the marks, that we have high quality and diverse storage reservoirs and options. We have efficient and safe cap rocks. We have thousands of feet of really impermeable um, geologic formations that separate storage from drinking water and the surface. We have past and ongoing research to lean on. We're a structurally stable basin, which means we don't have much seismic activity. We have tough rocks. We have a lot of good experience to lean on in the subsurface. We have successfully demonstrated CCUS in northern Michigan. We have a lot of subsurface management skills as well. And we have support from emitters, industry, academia, researchers, and so on that will really help propel CCUS forward in Michigan. With that, if you have any questions, unfortunately, I can't stay on for the Q&A, but my email is here. You can feel free to reach out with any questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Autumn. The commentary about the sheer number of years of storage that's possible is very, very interesting. And I think the idea that we already do storage in other ways for natural gas, for example, I think that was really interesting. Okay, next we're going to introduce Susan Fancy with the University of Michigan. There was some talk about how the slides weren't fully visible. We will email the slides to all of you as soon as this is done. Sorry about that.
Hello, good morning. I am I am from the University of Michigan. I'm from the Global CO2 Initiative, although I am today presenting as a citizen in alignment with our university's guidelines. I have been working in the field of carbon capture and utilization for about 10 years. So today I would, thank you, Autumn. She always tees this up so nicely. Would like to talk to you about how we can utilize carbon dioxide. If we're going to go to the work to capture CO2, as Autumn has described, it makes sense to stick a tap off that pipeline and let's make some stuff. So let's take a look at, let me see. Sorry, I'm not getting my, okay. All right, now are we, okay, hopefully now we're in presentation mode. Are you able to see a slide of products?
That looks good.
Okay. There's two ways we can capture carbon dioxide. We see that at the upper left-hand corner. One, we can capture out of a smokestack. The concentration in that instance is 10 to 20%, just depending on what the source is. We can also long-term capture from the air. We call that direct air capture or DAC. Concentration with direct air capture is 0.04%, so much, much lower. What one would think, seeing that information, is if we can, to the extent we especially have hard to abate industries, that's a cement plant there, or fossil fuel plants that need to live out their natural lifetimes, it does not make sense to, curtail the investments. It makes sense to capture in those smokestacks until they've reached retirement age. So what can we make with that captured CO2? Generally, carbon dioxide utilization products, they're in multiple industries here, and they tend to be business to business. So what we see on the left is we see concrete, both ready mix and what we call precast or concrete blocks. We see aggregates. There are fuels and chemicals, a wide variety, methanol, ethanol, sustainable aviation fuel, a lot of secondary chemicals are all possible with captured carbon dioxide. On the right, you do see some examples of final consumer goods that have been made with captured carbon dioxide. We see there a line of clothing that was made from Adidas, made by Adidas a couple years ago using LanzaTex technology. There's the On shoe. That shoe is 70% captured carbon dioxide that's expected to be introduced next year. We see soap, we see vodka, we see hand sanitizer, and we also see food. And despite the actually attractive picture of a man drinking protein shake, the current application for captured carbon dioxide in foods is fish and cow food. But keep in mind, this is all very, very early scale. This industry is just getting started. One of the largest carbon utilization projects that I know of is Carbon Free Chemicals. They're going to be making food-grade calcium carbonate, capturing off of United States steel plants in Gary, Indiana, starting next year. And they're at 50,000 tons a year. To put that in perspective, our St. Mary's cement plant is 1.4 million tons, or Holcim is 1.5 million tons. So now those are, of course, the largest emitters in the state, but so we're just getting rolling, but that's excited. We need to get started. Let's talk about the types of products. There's two general categories. One is Track 1 products, and those store carbon dioxide in minerals, as we see with the concrete, or things like carbon nanotubes, graphite, long-lived plastics, things that at the end of life are either recycled or durably stored, in a landfill. So we consider that you're capturing the CO2, and then you're tying it up in a material so it's not having an impact on the climate going forward. We also have Track 2 products, though, and those are things like chemicals and fuels, short-lived plastics, those foods. And in this case, we can think about it as using the same molecules over and over again. In this case, we are defossilizing. One of the words that drives me crazy is sometimes we say we're decarbonizing. We are not decarbonizing. We are not changing organic chemistry. Carbon isn't everything. What we are doing is we're defossilizing. We are accessing carbon in a new way. We've done a couple of market studies of the Global CO2 Initiative. We do advise the Department of Energy, and also we curate the World Economic Forum Strategic Intelligence page for carbon capture and utilization. I'm very proud that we are one of the few organizations globally that is an expert on CCU. Although, again, if you quote me, please today quote me as myself and not the Global CO2 Initiative. But anyway, we've done a couple market studies, one in 2016. We updated it last year. What we were looking at is how big are the markets for products that can use carbon dioxide as a feedstock, those Track 1 and Track 2 products. So Track 1, the biggest opportunity is, and what we see in the blue box there is how many dollars per year in trillions of dollars globally. So what we see is up to $1 trillion market per year that can use up to 9.5 gigatons per year of CO2, that durable storage in concrete and aggregates. One thing I might mention, a fun little known fact, is that concrete is second only to water in per capita global usage, and it's increasing every year. So the opportunity to store CO2 in concrete and aggregates is super exciting. The second opportunity is fuels, in particular sustainable aviation fuel, where we see up to a $2 trillion market and up to almost 11 gigatons of CO2 per year. And then we also see opportunities in chemicals, those carbon black materials, plastics, and foods. What can we make with carbon dioxide in Michigan? We did do a study a few years ago, 3 years ago to be exact, where we looked at what we could do with all of St. Mary's kiln emissions. So we took an initial look at the supply chains in Michigan. What are we making here? Where could CO2 captured from St. Mary's potentially be used? And of course, aggregates and concrete and chemicals and fuels are at the top of the list in terms of volume, but also plastics, animal and fish feed. We have greenhouses here. We have beverage production. We make urea, which urea tends to be made from fossil sources, if you did not know that. And that can be made from captured carbon dioxide. Biochar, we have a lot of farming. Tires, we have actually a lot of tire production in both Michigan and regionally. Carbon nanotube products, batteries, paints, plastics, and more. Lots of opportunities. So one of the things that's really, really exciting is when you hear what Autumn was saying about our ability to be a leader in terms of geological sequestration. That is very helpful, because geological sequestration and utilization of products, especially at this point in time, go hand in hand. What makes sense is to have hubs where you are capturing carbon dioxide and storing some of it underground, and then starting to get these industries established or route to existing industries at the same time. So Michigan truly has an opportunity to lead in this space, both with our geology and our history as an industrial manufacturing center. So we're super excited about this. Just last few slides. The IPCC, these are the people who say, oh, we need to keep global warming to 1.5 degrees, 2 degrees C. This slide shows you how much carbon dioxide removal we need to be making and by when. The point that I want to highlight in this slide, so that green box down below is where we capture CO2 from the air or from biomass and then turn that into products. So Consumers Energy is converting their Filer City plant into a BECCS plant, bioenergy with carbon capture and sequestration. If we were to make products from the emissions from that plant, those would be carbon negative products. That's a really exciting opportunity for us. So we need to remove 10 gigatons by 2050. We could do that with concrete and aggregates alone. Now, there are a few final slides. There is a company called Marquis. They're the next state over. They're in Illinois, and they have a center where they are capturing CO2. They're injecting underground into Class 6 wells, and they are making fuels and looking at making other chemicals. They're just getting going, but it's a really nice centralized example. They have good access to rail, highways. So they both have an ability to import CO2 and export it through products. You can also capture on a modular basis. This is an example where you can just stick a capture unit on the back of a single plant and make, this particular example is for aggregates or concrete. I will just include the slide deck for this level of detail, but this shows what an ecosystem or a hub might look like, the various components. So we see injection underground, and we see a variety of industries here on this slide. And just want to mention that the ecosystem for carbon capture, utilization, and storage is complicated. It's really complicated. That's not a negative. What that means is that it needs really close coordination. And with what we see, with what's going on with the chamber, with us academically, we see it at the state level. I think that we are well on our way to having really strong coordination that is going to support the birth of this field in Michigan. And that's the end of my comments. I'll drop the slides in the chat.
Thank you so much, Susan. Oh, that was fantastic. Now, while the bills that Michael Amo will later talk about are focused on getting permitting for storage underground, the point that Susan makes is really important because without that process being put in place, we can't move as easily or at all into the utilization side of this thing. And it's really exciting when you see the huge amount of products that could be made instead of releasing this into the air the way it might be today. That ranges from, like Susan said, the number 2 used substance on Earth, cement, all the way to food grade materials for consumption. So very important. I'm going to flip over now to Rich Bowman with the Nature Conservancy.
Thanks, John. And John, can you confirm that you can hear me okay?
You sound great.
Great. And my apologies to everyone. I've been having some technical difficulties with my audio this morning, so I'm utilizing my phone to speak to you and listen to you. A lot of folks have asked why the Nature Conservancy is involved with this coalition in this effort, and it really is relatively simple for us. We were involved a number of years ago with an effort between the business community and the conservation community to get delegated authority for Michigan for our regulation of wetlands and inland lakes and streams under the Clean Water Act. And it was because the business community wanted more certainty in permitting, and we wanted a stronger, more robust program. And we got that, and it's been really helpful to us, particularly in light of the fact that at the federal level in recent years, each time we've got a new administration, they've moved the goalposts on those areas one way or the other. This is an effort to do the exact same thing. It doesn't mean that CCUS in Michigan won't happen if we don't do this. What it means is if we don't do this, we don't have the ability to have a say in how it's done and how we protect our environment and how we make this work for our economy and our communities. So doing this, we believe, is an important effort. We're going to be actively involved in thinking about the bills and making them better as we work our way through the process. But we absolutely believe, for both the reasons that Autumn said, that our geology is uniquely suited to this, that this will happen here, and for the reasons that Susan just said, it is potentially a positive opportunity for us to do this. I also will say that from the standpoint of the Nature Conservancy's efforts in decarbonizing the economy, we really have three things that we're trying to do. One is, wherever possible, encourage folks to reduce emission sources. The second one is using our natural systems like our forests and our farmlands to capture and sequester more carbon and to move it into that circular economy that Susan's talking about. And then the third and the important one is the work that we're talking about here today, which is to recognize that in order to meet the goals we want to meet with managing carbon in the atmosphere, we want to, when it makes sense, to recapture and store that, or capture it before it goes into the atmosphere and store it and use it for other things. So with that, I'm going to be happy to take questions, and we'll turn it back to you, John.
All right, thank you. And that was an excellent comparison to the movement of water permitting from the EPA to the state level. That's essentially what we're trying to do here. And Michael Lama will talk about that in a few minutes. But next up, we're going to hear from Robert George from the Michigan Laborers.
Thank you, John. Good morning, everyone. My name is Robert George. I am the Government Affairs Director for the Michigan Laborers District Council, the Michigan affiliate of the Laborers International Union of North America. We represent roughly 15,000 active and retired members across the state of Michigan. We primarily our members primarily work in the energy and construction sectors across Michigan. We build Michigan, and that includes a varied of different items, including environmental remediation, new construction with roads and heavy highways, as well as demolition and many aspects of Michigan's energy sector. Which brings us to why we are supportive of carbon capture. And it really comes down to two items for us. One, the new job creation, which would also include job retention, as well as the fact that we represent people, our members, our residents of Michigan, and they care very much about a clean environment as well. And so far as maintaining current aspects of our jobs and our members' careers, we have a lot of folks that are parts of the supportive systems for heavy manufacturing across Michigan. And the more that we can keep our heavy industry and keep our heavy industry competitive on an international and a domestic scale, the more jobs we can keep in Michigan, and the more folks in my union and other unions like mine that can continue to be employed and can continue to have middle-class sustaining careers. And, you know, especially when we're talking about some of the items around heavy manufacturing, whether it's dealing with general materials production or with finished items such as automobiles and so forth, the ability to have carbon capture to be able to keep our companies competitive is very crucial for job retention here in our state, as well as being able to be on the front line of new technologies and be a leader in the national space on carbon capture, especially when we look around regionally and see that states in our own region are plowing ahead with this technology and looking to take the lead from us on that. And so far as creating new jobs, when we're talking about the expansion of carbon capture within our energy facilities, being able to continue to expand in areas that already have existing energy infrastructure and build further out on those facilities allows job creation in areas of our state that aren't always the most plentiful, especially when we're looking at some of our heavier energy production sites that are in some of our rural areas. Keeping job retention in those spaces is really crucial, as those facilities are often the key driver of local employment, local tax bases, very important to maintain those communities and those communities' financial successes. And also, what was touched on by some of our environmental folks earlier in this presentation about materials costs, that's also very important to my union. One of the core aspects of what we do is energy is general construction there. And when we're talking about heavy industry and how the creation of some of these aggregates, like items like Susan mentioned with concrete, materials costs are a huge component insofar as the big picture when it comes to construction. And as we're looking to continue to build out our housing stock here in Michigan, as we're continuing to look at and how we can replace our aging infrastructure, such as our heavy highways and our bridges, being able to keep materials costs down to the degree that we can allows for more construction projects, more employment for folks in my union and across the building trades. And knowing that we've seen in recent years heavy increases in construction materials costs, we saw a 22% increase in the cost of concrete between 2022 and 2023 from a study from the National Association of Home Builders across the United States. And when you're seeing that level of increase in costs for materials, that means that there's simply just less money to go around for less projects. And that means less employment, and that means continued increases in the cost of housing and the affordability of projects for our core infrastructure replacement items. So, when we're, getting behind a project like this, a package of bills like this, we really do take a comprehensive viewpoint, not only just from the employment perspective, but how is this going to help our members be able to have those middle-class sustaining careers and lifestyles here in Michigan. Thank you, John.
Thank you, Robert. Fantastic job there. He really hit home on some of the points that Mike will make, that this is a win-win, really. If you compare and put Rich and Robert's talking points or their remarks side by side, this is a pro-environmental thing that will help keep carbon out of our air and help decarbonize our economy. At the same time, we're in a competition not only with the world, but especially with the states right around us. And so every time that our state is competing for projects, these companies are looking ahead and saying, will Michigan be on the cutting edge of things like carbon capture? Well, we're behind. Pennsylvania, Indiana, Illinois, other states outside the Midwest region are already passing laws and moving forward on this thing. So we really need to bring that permitting process home so that we can move forward on more projects and put it in the hands of Eagle, but get more emphasis put on it than is currently being put on by the EPA. So with that, I'm going to introduce Mike Alamo. He will talk through a lot of these issues, including what you'll run into, which is known as the 45Q tax credit, and why, even though a lot of clean energy tax credits have been kind of batted around in Congress, the 45Q that relates to carbon capture remained in the big beautiful bill, quote unquote, that moved over to the Senate. So we've got some real optimism on our ability to move forward on this. So with that, I'll introduce Mike Alamo.
Yeah, thanks so much, John. Thanks everybody for your time today on a Monday morning. My name is Mike Alamo. I'm our Senior Director of Legislative and External Affairs for the Michigan Chamber. I handle our energy and environment portfolio, and that's why proud and happy to be here today supporting the My Success Coalition alongside our friends from academia, labor, and environmental. As has been pointed out, this really is a win-win policy solution for the state. It's a tool in the toolbox. It's not a silver bullet, but it is an incredibly important way we can help drive Michigan forward into the future. As Rich pointed out, this is one of those tools, one of those technologies that can help support local area missions. This is a situation where Susan showed with some really great graphics there that you could be pulling carbon directly from the air, and we have the technology to do that. But what we're really seeing, across the states and across the country is a movement to capture our industrial source emissions, latching on to those smokestacks, capturing, more than just the carbon dioxide, but ultimately refining out the carbon dioxide and then being able to sequester it into the ground. And so that is, very appealing for some of our industrial employers in the state that see the opportunity to make, their next investment, potentially without an air permit or maybe a minor source air permit instead of a major source air permit. These opportunities are a big deal. We know that there has been, there will continue to be concerns around emissions and our carbon footprint when it comes to this next generation of investment that we are looking at doing. But we know we need to make those investments. As Robert pointed out, we know we need to make investments in the next generation of our heavy highway system, in our industrial capacity. We want to onshore manufacturing jobs. These are all really important things to continue to ensure American prosperity. At the same time, we want to make sure that we're doing it the right way and protecting our environment in the process. And so you have this opportunity of looking at bringing on new investments from energy intensive industries, but being able to do so with a lower emissions profile and enabling the capture of their CO2 emissions. At the same time, Susan pointed out, you're able to then these spaces where utilization is growing, you're able to actually use them to then decarbonize the energy intensive industry itself through the products they're making. And so this is a very unique space where, I don't know really of any other example or issue area where you have this ability to, make a strong economic development argument and at the same time say this is good for our environment, this is good for our local communities, et cetera. We do see states like Indiana and Ohio and Illinois moving on this. We do know that we've seen company investment go to Indiana because they had a carbon capture program and the ability to decarbonize their next investment. And so this is something we are truly seeing as a growing movement. The bills themselves, in their simplest form, they seek for primacy from the federal government on the Class 6 well program. And so, that is essentially what we are looking to do. You can seek a permit application for a carbon capture project right now through the EPA. There's nothing preventing a company applicant from doing that. The difference is, as Rich pointed out, is having a domestic program run by Michigan state government is that, we're allowing a process and a regulatory structure that gives communities a say, and part of the decision-making process gives, local state authorities and experts like folks from the Geologic Survey that know Michigan's geology better than anybody. Those are the folks that should be making the decisions around where a carbon capture facility and project is appropriate. And then, as was pointed out, this is an opportunity to bring those communities together. We're having really productive conversations with our agribusiness and farmer groups and advocates who, always leery of bills and developments that have land use considerations. But of course, this is different, type of land use where the majority of your project, the majority of, the where you are putting that carbon dioxide is happening deep below the ground. And so for many, their land use will not change. And so that's a really exciting component of this as well. So, we are looking forward to moving these bills forward. As many of you know, we were able to get some really great traction late in the year during lame duck through the Senate and get that through the Senate Energy Environment Committee. We are expecting the bills for this year to drop most likely tomorrow during session, and we are hearing that a committee hearing will be held very, very shortly thereafter, as soon as Thursday. And so we're excited to begin that conversation again in the Senate. Hopefully, we will see movement through the committee in fairly short order, given that the committee has already voted the bills out. And then we can move to the Senate floor. As John pointed out, we also have House versions of the bills that will be dropped in the coming weeks, and working with leadership in the House on that issue. And so we think we have really good bill sponsors there. We think we're gonna, we've been really working to educate House Republicans and Democrats alike on the importance of this. And so we think that we're positioning ourselves really well to move this issue through the summer months, and we'll certainly see where we go from there. But we think this is a really great issue for divided government to take up. There are issues across the board for why you should support having the ability to do this, right? We're not incentivizing it. We're not mandating it. This isn't any kind of state requirement. This is the ability to regulate for these facilities to come online where and when it makes sense and is appropriate. John pointed out that the 45Q tax credit is a piece of the economics for carbon capture. So certainly, we have folks that wouldn't be interested in projects if those tax credits weren't available. And we know that this administration has been supportive of carbon capture as a tool for under their energy independence pillar, under their priority of growing manufacturing jobs. So we think that this is an issue that's ripe for this legislature to take on, and so we're hoping to see movement very soon. I think with that, I'll turn it back over to John.
All right, thank you. And I suspect over the course of the next week or less that we'll start to see some more support come on board publicly for these bills and eventually the House versions as well. With that, just raise your hand if you have a question. And way ahead of me is Jordan Hermany. So Jordan from Bridge, please go ahead.
Hi, thanks for taking my question. So I do admittedly have a few, but I'll start with the simplest one. For readers who will inevitably read about this later, I guess in the simplest of terms, what exactly is this legislation seeking to do? Obviously, it deals with permitting, but insofar as carbon capture, I mean, are we advocating here for catching it out of the spout and storing it underground? Like, how would you go about explaining what this would do to somebody completely ignorant of the conversation surrounding carbon capture?
Yeah, sure. I can take that one, Jordan. Thanks for the question. In its simplest form, this is, like you said, creating a regulatory structure in Michigan so that we can set up a carbon capture facility that would either, under the most likely scenarios, either be attached to a smokestack or an industrial hub, so maybe several smokestacks in a given area, or a energy production facility. So Susan, I think, mentioned the facility up north where they're converting a coal-fired power plant to a biomass plant with carbon capture, or a natural gas generation facility, and you're able to capture that, refine it, and then you are essentially piping it deep into the Earth's surface. And you're not. What's interesting about this, and what I think is important for folks to note that might be skeptical of this type of process because it reminds them of a fracking or an enhanced oil recovery. You're not pressurizing that system, that geologic formation in any way. You're working within the pore space of that geologic formation, and then simply capturing it there. And then once it's stabilized, you're essentially capping the pipeline. You continue to monitor that site to make sure that the CO2 isn't moving any further than your estimates and analysis projected it's going to, and then you're permanently sequestering that CO2. But of course, we do have great opportunities for utilization down the road as well. So the bills seek to allow for the permitting of those facilities.
All right, Rich has a comment too.
Yeah, I'm going to pick on Mike a little bit because I heard Jordan ask for a simple answer, and I'm not sure that was simple, Mike. But the simple answer is, do you want these decisions made by a federal bureaucrat, or do you want them made here in the state by us and our neighbors? And that's why we're here, because we want this decision made that's the best for Michigan by folks from Michigan.
And if I could ask a follow-up, actually, Rich, that segs perfectly into something I was hoping to either ask you or Susan. When this legislation came up last term, there were also a number of environmental groups opposed to it, Sierra Club among them. I didn't know, and maybe this is also a Mike question, if the legislation at all has altered in any way to address some of these concerns. I know that there were concerns that there was no baseline monitoring for air and soil gas, no requirement that operators use modeling software to track and plan around potential leaks, things of that nature. Just curious if anyone on the call can dig into that a bit more.
Yeah, for what it's worth, Jordan, I appreciate that. We appreciated the environmental groups that opposed last year speaking to a number of those concerns. A number of those concerns we do not feel like are real in that they are addressed in the bill. So these bills seek to follow the federal specifications for carbon capture technology. That includes monitoring. That includes ensuring that groundwater and surface water protections are in place. And again, we feel like Eagle, the Michigan department, is best suited to ensure that those environmental regulations are prioritized during any kind of application process. We're going to continue to talk to the environmental groups. We think that there are probably other types of issues that we can work on together. But generally speaking, I think any kind of language that we're agreeing on with the environmental groups is probably a belt and suspenders approach because we feel like the environmental protections within the current legislation is very strong. But I don't know if Richard, Susan want to add to that.
I would just add that from our perspective, we generally agree the federal program is the baseline, and this will absolutely have to at least have the baseline of the federal program. Part of the legislative process is to have those discussions and to see if there are more things that we want to do. But again, the importance of this for us is that we are seeking the delegated authority, and that's the delegated authority for the permitting, for the monitoring, for the enforcement. All of those things we bring to have done by us here in Michigan as opposed to the federal government. And as we're experiencing right now today, having the federal government be the decision maker, depending on your point of view, may not be the optimal solution.
Rich, could you briefly walk through your analogy to the water and streams permitting process? That seems like it's a good example for what we're trying to do here.
Sure. So under the Clean Water Act that was adopted over 50 years ago now, there are things that are required related to the protection of wetlands, protections of our inland lakes and streams. And again, that is done in, I think, 48 of the 50 states by the EPA and the Army Corps of Engineers. Early on in the implementation of that law back in the late 70s, business and the environmental community, the conservation community in Michigan got together and said, we think we can do this better. And there's a provision under many federal environmental statutes that allow states to seek delegated authority. The one requirement under delegated authority is that whatever your state program is, it has to be equal to or more protective of the environment than the federal standard. And so where this has really come into play is a recent Supreme Court decision about 2 years ago called the Sackett decision, which changed which wetlands fall under federal regulation and which do not. And the fact is that created a lot of upheaval and a lot of concern among many folks across the country. And it really was a non-event here in Michigan because we have our own standard, which is more restrictive than the federal standard. And Sackett didn't change our standard.
All right, thank you.
One other comment about this is that the EPA is the timing of things. The EPA currently has 60 Class 6 well permits in review right now, and the lead times are very, very long. So in addition to if this legislation goes forward, Michigan being able to make decisions for our own state will also be able to do that a lot more quickly.
So just to drive the point home, it sounds like a lot of these concerns might be preemptive. We need to get the regulatory power first before we can say that this is a real thing that could happen.
Yeah, the legislation is really important in order for us to move forward with the application for primacy, which then gives us the delegated authority, which then means that we can, have folks apply to Eagle. And as Susan pointed out, there's a pretty significant bottleneck over at the EPA, and so that it would help expedite that process a little bit. But of course, make sure that it's done with every consideration to the local community that's being impacted, right? And just one last thought, Jordan. I mean, I think what we hear when we talk to environmental groups is they understand why we need this. And so they are kind of careful, not to put words in their mouth, but from my understanding, I think they are kind of careful to say that they were opposed to the legislation as written last year, not the concept as a whole. And so that's what we're hoping to work on together is, okay, we agree that this is important. We agree that this is needed. Maybe it's for different reasons, maybe not. I think, from the chamber, we're, supportive of all the reasons you would like this. So let's find the landing spot here so we can move the bills forward.
Yeah, and Jordan, one thing on your characterization that I would modify a little bit. This can happen now. These bills don't prevent this from happening. These bills move it from the federal decision-making process to a state decision-making process.
And that's because, like, as Susan said, that the EPA moves at a glacial pace at this point. All right. Any other questions, Jordan?
No, thank you very much, all of you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jordan.
I'm going to turn it over now to Andy Miniger from MERS. Go ahead, Andy.
Thank you very much. I appreciate you taking my question. So I had a couple. The first one is, who are you guys working with in the legislature right now, to both the states, the Senate and the House, to sponsor these bills and kind of get them where they need to be?
Yeah. Thanks, Andy. So we have the same bill sponsors in the Senate we had last year. So Senator McCann, chair of the Energy Environment Committee, is our lead sponsor. And then Senator Cherry is also has one of the bills. And finally, Senator Bellino. And so really, really great co-sponsors all around. Senator Cherry cares very much about the conservation and the benefits that the bill will bring when and where we are doing projects on state land. We'll be able to put money into the Natural Resource Trust Fund, and so for that and other reasons, he's very supportive. Obviously, Senator McCann, being chair of the committee, he cares about these issues, this ecosystem of issues, and then Senator Bellino, a former chair of Energy Committee, and so in the House, and so. Really great to see all those folks joining it. On the House side, we are working through Rep. Wenzel, chair of the House Energy Committee. We do expect her to be lead sponsor of the bills. Of course, we're still kind of in the process of working through those issues. And then we have Samantha Steckloff as our Democratic sponsor, and then we're likely to have another Republican sponsor on the House package, just reflective of the divided government dynamic. Stay tuned on that. We have a number of options, and so we're kind of just working through leadership to understand what they'd like us to do moving forward.
And the follow up to that, you went into the divided legislature dynamic, and I wanted to kind of dig into that just a little bit with the split legislature. What support are you seeing from each party, and is this something that you guys feel with the divided legislature that you can kind of push this through? Uh, I noticed that you're talking about dropping one in House and one in Senate. Does that kind of play to that dynamic?
To answer those questions, yes. We definitely think that this is a really great issue for divided government. Of course, that means that there is that nuance and complication of, making sure that folks understand, why they support it and understanding why their colleagues across the aisle support it, and seeing that as just a win-win across the board, right? So certainly we have, Democrats saying this was baked into the My Healthy Climate Plan and the industrial decarbonization strategy that Governor Whitmer has moved on. And then we have the 23 energy law that makes a requirement that carbon capture be a part of natural gas and the future of natural gas in the state. And then, of course, on the Republican side, you have the opportunity to look at the economic development benefits of having a program like this in the state. One of the things that I think Susan speaks to so greatly is this idea that CO2 is a commodity, and so there's actually economic efficiency baked into why you would want this, right? You're taking a waste product and you're creating value out of it. Even if you're storing it geologically, there's value there. But certainly when we're able to scale this out, you have the opportunity to make real products out of it. So yes, we're encouraging lawmakers to just see the win across the board and lean into that.
So now you touched on you're kind of playing into my questions here. Sorry about that.
No problem. I see that's a
My
good thing.
my question is my next question has to do with the you're talking you and Susan had talked about the actual products that are being made, but where is that industry right now? Like I'm not seeing like I saw one mention of it to turn into fuels, but is this something that has to be scaled up? Like, and where is that scale? Where's the money coming from? Like, what's the basis for that? Like, it doesn't seem to be there right now. That's my question.
That's a great question, Andy. I'll take that one. So the scaling of the industry depends on where you are. In Europe, they have a regulated carbon market, and so the industry is scaling nicely in that market. Here in the United States, scaling is driven by two things. One is the 45 tax credit that Mike mentioned. Another thing is driving scaling is the sale of what we call carbon offsets in the voluntary carbon markets. That is where if you capture a ton of CO2, depending on what you do with it, you can get a certain amount of dollars for a carbon credit that is traded through various exchanges and forums. Companies will use carbon credits to reduce their Scope 3 emissions. So in the United States, scaling, first of all, the industry right now, it's nascent. This is just emerging. We're just getting started. Nobody even knew what this industry was 10 years ago. And right now, it's just beginning. There are a really, really large number of startups. I'm grateful to say that I work with a lot of them. But companies like LanzaTech, for example, they are one of the global leaders on sustainable aviation fuel. As a frame of reference for them, just in December, they filled their first barge worth of SAF. That's where scaling's at. Again, there's capture going on at United States Steel starting next year. They're going to be at 50,000 tons, hopefully by the end of next year for food grade calcium carbonate. We have companies like CarbonCure and CarbonBuilt making concrete and aggregates, but the volumes right now are still small. That's why it needs coordinated attention. It's not going to happen on its own. One of the biggest barriers that I see is people just simply don't know about it. That, and then coming up with the economic model, what is a technology pathway that is suitable for a given location and industry. Also, it just has to be fine-tuned like any other new business. So I hope that at least starts to answer the question. It's a really good question. There's a kind of complex answer behind it, but I'll leave it at that.
That's perfect. I appreciate that. But that goes into my last question, which is, given the amount of carbon dioxide that's being captured out of these industries, uh, it, it is going to be taking up a lot of space and not being used. Is this going to actually take up storage space that would be used by hydrogen, natural gas? Like, is this going to be something that would absolutely just decimate storage in Michigan?
I think
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
I think that's probably a good detail question for Autumn, but based on the just exorbitantly huge capacity we have, no. Yeah, Mike, what were you gonna say?
No, I was going to say the same thing
Yeah.
this is when I wished Autumn was able to stay on. But I mean, just underscoring that their analysis is Michigan has hundreds of years of capacity for this.
Yeah.
So, we can do all of those things, I think, and we would, from the chamber's perspective at least, we would be supportive of doing all of those things. And then I think, one of the ways I see this scaling out, Andy, the utilization piece is really interesting, right? Economies of scale matter. You're going to have an opportunity to, take some of these when you talk about plastics, they're the fillers in the plastics or the fillers in the paints that I'm sorry that are used. That's not necessarily sexy, but it's really important that we understand once you're able to scale out the ability to capture this CO2. Once you've got it, sure, you can store it geologically, but if you think about a developer who's okay, I've got a project, I've got maybe 15 years of life on this geologic formation. At some point in time, I'm going to want to start exploring utilization because that's another potential revenue stream that I can use to then offset the capacity in my geologic storage, right? So I'm able to extend the life. I'm able to extend the life of my geologic storage project while at the same time look at another revenue and product stream. So,
Mhm.
anyways,
Thank you. I appreciate you taking my questions.
Thank you, Andy. We're gonna now move to Dave Eggert from Cranes. Go ahead, David.
Hey, thanks. Quick question. There was mention that there's something like 60 projects in the EPA pipeline. I was curious if any are in Michigan, and it could move to the state process if the bills are, become law.
It's a good question, David. I could take a quick look. There was, I know previously at least one project at the federal level. I'm not sure it can transfer though. I don't know actually how that works, but pretty sure once you've applied to the EPA, I think you're probably stuck with going through the EPA process. It would be for new applications, I guess my understanding. EPA has a tracker if you want to look for it. It's EPA Class 6 well tracker. And I think Lambda had an application in. I don't know if there's anybody else, but yeah.
I think that's right. We might have one other one that I'm aware of. I'd have to check, so we could circle back with you on that, David.
All right, thank you.
We do know that this EPA administration is supportive of this approach of seeking primacy. The new administrator, Lee Zeldin, one of the first things he did in the public sphere was go to West Virginia for the signing of their primacy legislation. And so they understand that it's probably most appropriate for states to make these decisions. And so they're supportive of this process.
All right. Well, with that, we tried to keep this thing to an hour, ran a little over, but we had some really good questions. So thank you to everybody who's been on with us today.